Hi, so today we're going to be looking at kick drum. Now I've looked at kick drum before in a previous video, but this is a really different sounding kick drum. The previous one was quite a tight, hard sounding kick, and this is the opposite of that. It's a common kick drum sound you get in jazz where it's quite soft and it sustains quite a bit. So it's got a tuned note and it's sustaining. And although that can sound really good in a lot of context, in this situation, the tuning was very low, so it was a very low note, and it was sustaining quite a bit, and it was quite an up-tempo track, and it was really muddying it up to the point where you really couldn't hear the bass very clearly, or the kick drum. So we're going to look at how I tightened that up and improved the kick drum sound and got it working a lot better in this particular setting. Before we get going on that, if you can subscribe and like the video, that really helps me a lot, so it's greatly appreciated. And I hope you find this useful, so let's have a look. Okay, so here we are, and I'm going to have a listen to the kick drum in context to start with, and then we'll hear it on its own. So this is before any processing was done, so you can hear how it sounded before I did anything, and just have a listen to the kick drum and the bass in particular and how they sound together and how much detail you can pick out about what's going on down there. So here we go with that. And I'm going to jump a bit forward to where it starts getting a bit busier. So you can hear that it's pretty muddy down there, hard to hear the details of what the kick and sometimes what the bass is doing down there. And in this kind of music, it's really important to be able to hear those kind of details, because the kick with a drummer like this, they're improvising with what the kick is doing, and it's driving the improvisation and interacting of the improvisation of the other players. So it's really important that you hear all that interaction, and it's the same with the bass, of course, and the other instruments. But you know, when you can't hear the bass or the kick drum very well, then you're kind of missing the details of that interaction that's going on. So now I'm going to put in the processing. So hopefully you can hear that it's a lot clearer down there now. You can hear more easily what the kick drum's doing, and you can hear the bass more clearly, and the whole thing just sounds tighter and easier to hear the details. So let's now have a listen to the kick on its own, and we'll start with what it was like just as I got it without the processing. So you can hear there's a lot of sustain on it. It is tuned to a note. It's quite a low note though, and that sustain is acting as a kind of blanket of sound which is clouding up the bass instrument, the acoustic bass, and also clouding up the kick drum itself, especially once it starts kind of being more busy. Now, sometimes it's intentional to have a tuned note on a kick drum in jazz, and sometimes people will tune the note to the key of a particular tune. The problem with that, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do, and it can sound good. It's just the problem with doing it in most recording sessions that you can't retune the kick for every tune you play. There isn't the time. So you could end up with a kick that's in tune for one tune and not the right pitch for another tune. Because essentially what you're doing when you do that is you're creating a pedal note that sits under the entire chord progression. Now again, whether that's something that you actually want is an artistic choice. But I think it's really worth kind of thinking about the fact that that is what you are essentially doing if you're tuning your bass drum and it's got sustain on it, like this. It's basically like having a sustaining bass note going throughout the whole tune. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing. I mean, it could be good in some tunes if it fits the key of the tune, but then again, you might get some chords where it doesn't fit and it's dissonant. Or you could have a whole tune where it's not really fitting with most of the chords in that tune, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that dissonance loosens things up a bit in terms of improvising. I don't know. I'm just not saying whether it's a good or a bad thing. I'm simply saying that it's really worth keeping in mind that when you tune your kick drum, if it's got a sustain on it, like this one does, you're creating a pedal tone, and that may or may not be something that you want to do. So anyway, in this case, it's tuned really low, so it's not really going to function, at least to my ears, as a pedal tone. It's more of just creating mud. So the first thing I did was to clean that up. So I got a Transient designer. This is a good one from Oxford Sonnox, Oxford Envolution, and I've set it up. So I'll bring it in and out. Start with it out, and then bring it in. So you can hear it really pulls back that sustain. And right now it sounds like it's killing it, but actually I have left quite a bit of space there. I've not just killed it off completely. I've set these controls up so that it preserves a fair amount of the body of the kick, because I want to work with it after this. And if I'd killed it off too much, there wouldn't be anything to work with. So you're not really hearing that yet, but it is there. So the next thing was EQing, and what I did was, because I'd cut back enough on it, I was able to boost the low end and give it more weight, more body on the low end. So I'm down quite low, around 50 hertz, boosting there. But then I'm high passing it just below that at 40 hertz to contain it and tighten up the low end and clean that up and kind of tighten in that boost. And then I'm cutting back here quite a bit at about 500 hertz, just to pull out some of the kind of boxiness of it, and then boosting to get the attack to come out more at around 2K here. So I'll have a listen to it out, and then I'll bring it in. So you can hear a lot more body coming in there. I'm going to jump forward now to where it's busier, because he's going to be hitting it a lot harder and it changes the tone a lot. So again, I'm going to start with it out and bring it in. So you can hear, again, a lot more weight and some more attack with the EQ in, and it is bringing a little bit of the cymbal bleed through, but that's going to be masked by the overheads, so I'm not worried about that. So even after I cleaned up the kick drum and it was sounding a lot better, I still felt in this particular case that I needed a bit more. So I did something I don't normally do on acoustic jazz, and that is I side-chained compressor onto the bass, which I'll show you. Again, it's not something I normally do in jazz, but in this case I felt like it needed it. So I've got a compressor here on the bass, and we'll listen to the drums and the bass, and I'll bring this in and out so you can hear it. So what this is doing is, in case you're not familiar with side chain compression, this compressor is on the bass, but it's listening to the kick drum through the side chain. So every time the kick drum hits, it's pulling down the volume of the bass momentarily, and that allowing the kick drum to come through more. So I've got a fast attack and a release that was long enough to let the body of the kick come through. I really wanted the body, not just the transient, to come through. So this is longer than you might have it for, you know, a shorter percussive sidechain. So just before I play it, I'll mention that it's gonna maybe sound like I brought the piano in as well as the bass. But actually that's just bleed through on the bass mic, and there was a lot of bleed on this session, the way it was recorded, which was actually quite problematic in mixing it, which maybe would be interesting to look at, how I dealt with that, but maybe I'll do another video about that. But just so you know why the piano sounds like it's come in, it hasn't really been brought in. I'm just going to bring in the drums and bass, and then I'm going to start with this out and then bring it in. So again, listen to the kick drum and how clearly you can hear it. So quite a dramatic difference. Maybe not even do it quite as much as I've done it here in the final mix, but you can hear what a difference that makes in terms of getting that kick to really come through. So now let's just have another listen to everything in context, before and after, just so you can hear again what we started with and what we ended up with. So this is the kick drum before, and then we'll hear it afterwards. And now with the processing in. So hopefully you can hear there's quite a difference there in how clearly you can hear both the kick drum and the bass. And as a final note, you might think, I would if I heard this, there's kind of a lot of reverb on the piano. And that is, again, to do with the fact that the piano is bleeding through the mic of the bass. And they were in quite a big space, and so you're actually hearing the reverb from the room coming through the bass mic, the reverb of the piano. So there's absolutely nothing that can be done about that. So it is a little bit reverberant, the piano, but I hope you found this useful. If you did, give it a like, and hope to see you next time.